Copy. Good morning. I'm Paul Lane, and you are watching the Weekend Boost on KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive. I'm so happy to have you on our show today. We have a guest who is a special friend of mine and someone who I have a special bond with, and we'll talk a lot about that as we go into the show. But Barbara Nash Lopez is a powerhouse. She was a network executive. She was married to Jim Nash, White House news correspondent. And again, give a little teaser right now, but before I get started, I just want to talk about a couple of our past guests that we've had on the show. Before we go, I just, again, Virginia Sanchez was on our show. She wrote the book, Pleas and Petition, Hispano Culture and Legislative Conflict in Territorial Colorado. If you ever want to find out why Colorado's square, if you want to find out about the language barriers that have happened in Colorado and the Republican Party in the past, I tell you what, this book is a great read. Pleas and Petitions. Marilyn Saltzman was a guest on my show, Your Love is Blasting in My Heart. This is a fantastic book, and it really outlines a parent's relationship with their grandchildren, character building, and she takes a Jewish perspective on this, and that's a very, very good read. Marilyn Saltzman, Your Love is Blasting in My Heart. Lanny Cook he's actually written 5 books. Sons of the Eastern Plains is a story about his growing up and his cousin that were almost like brothers, and really an interesting book. This one I am in the process of reading right now. Kimberly Sanchez Cawthorn wrote, Legacy, Love and Legacy, Amor Eterne. This is a book that started out in the 1500s, and it goes to modern times, and it's a love story modeled after Victor Villaseñor's Reign of Gold. So really, really interesting read. Very good book. Rocio Perez was on our show not long ago. She wrote the book Unstoppable, a book on leadership. And Rocio will be on our show again very soon because I think she has so much to share. So nice to see a Latina Hispanic woman doing so well with herself and her life. Of course, everybody knows Albert Quintana. He was the host before me. One of his books was The Crochet Lady. He's written quite a few other books, but this is one of his books. You can find Albert's book on QuintanaReads.com. This is another great book. My girlfriend really liked this book, Amber Stevens' Food, Feelings, and Freedoms, The End to Emotional Eating. And when I started reading this book, I thought it was only for women, but guys have emotional eating problems, man, and this is a really good resource. The last one I want to talk about is Alyssa Robin. Dr. Alyssa Robin has a show on Thursdays. She does crystal ball reading. She's an astrologer. Very, very interesting woman. My girlfriend and me actually went this week. It was our 1-year anniversary. We went and met with Dr. Robin, and we did an astrological reading of both of our charts, and we put them superimposed on another to just see what our future holds. So these are just some of the past guests. We've had many, many more. I want to talk about one of my other guests, Dennis Ty, who was a 5-star Amazon bestseller, but I have his book loaned out right now, so I don't have it. And with that, we'll get into the show. Barbara, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Paul, for having me.
I am so excited. I've been trying to get you on the show for 6 months now, so I'm so happy to get you here.
Yeah. And Paul, Paul and I are friends, and we met through a mutual friend of ours, and as a topic comes up right away, and they sharing your life and who are you, and so much that is part of me is the recent death of my husband, Jim. He died of glioblastoma. And actually, Paul, this is interesting. 3 years ago today, I rode home with him in the ambulance for his final journey home.
Wow.
And he was so sick, but he knew he was home. He put up his thumb, and he knew that he was home. So, 3 years ago today, it's been a long 3 years. But Paul and I met, and I hope I'm not sharing something, Paul, that is outside our friendship and
no
shouldn't
bounds.
be shared. But we started talking. I said to Paul, we were sharing information. I said, my husband died of brain cancer. And he said, glioblastoma, right? And I said, yes. And that's the same thing his wife died of. And 3 years now after his death, I am more focused on all the good things that happened instead of the slow deterioration of his brain in the end, which was such a cruel trick of nature for somebody that was so smart. I acutely miss him during ballot issues and things because he was a White House correspondent for years, and he was so dedicated to giving both sides of the story. And so he would educate me on bond issues. This is that. Not that I can't read and make decisions myself, and sometimes I didn't go with his recommendation, but Jim was the love of my life. We married when I was in my 20s, he was in his 30s, and we had a hell of a ride. We met at KWGN in Denver.
Wow.
And I was the HR manager. We called it personnel back then. And Jim was a reporter, and that was a big, the HR manager and the reporter. But we kept it secret for years. We only almost got caught once, and we kept it separate from work. And when we were finally ready to get married, we went to the GM, and the GM said, nobody has known this at all, so you've been able to keep it separate this far, but if it becomes problematic, Jim, you're on contract, and Barbara, you're the one that would have to find a new job. So we accepted that. We were married in 1983, and then we moved to Washington, D.C., where Jim was a White House correspondent.
Wow.
So that was such a big deal for a Denver girl to move to the big city. I felt so cool when I would get on that metro and ride down to DC, and Jim covered all kinds of worldly stories. He covered a lot of business stories. He covered all the conventions where he would go to the Democratic convention, Republican convention. So my life was so blessed by Jim, and we were in the same business, which some people might not think is a good idea, that there needs to be some separation, but for us it worked great. I started my career in personnel at KWGN, and then when Jim was transferred to Washington, D.C., I had 3 job offers fairly quick. One was with the Washington Post, one was with the Capitol Center, and one was with a high-tech company called Unisys. Unisys was a Fortune 500 company, and as were the other 2, and that was really my goal when I moved to DC, was to get some HR experience in the Fortune 500 world. And I had a wonderful career with Unisys, and they were a company that was Sperry and Burroughs that merged in 1985. And so I went to work for them, and I started off my career in employee relations, and ended up my career after a huge reorganization of HR. They went from 600 employees in HR to 400. We had to apply for our job, apply for the new titles. And I got a huge promotion out of it. I was the East Coast director of recruiting, and there were more consultant titles at that time, but I had a team of 15 recruiters. We did a lot of federal contracting, so if we did not have the employee in the chair, we didn't get paid. So I had a wonderful team. We know there's really only 2 metrics in recruiting: time to fill and cost per hire. And our team took those 2 metrics and ran with it. And we were proud that we were the best in the country. Our region was the best in the country. And so I was loving Virginia. We lived in Virginia. We loved the trees. We loved how close it was to get on the train to go to Philly, to go anywhere. It was a great place to live. And in 1997, I got a call from the general manager at KTLA in Los Angeles, a super station, huge station. And my husband, my sweet husband, had always dreamed of working in LA. He loved political reporting, but he loved LA. And he had worked at a small market in Santa Barbara. And at that station was on top of a hill. And he said at night when he'd go to his car, he'd see the lights down in LA. And he said, someday I'm going to work in LA. And so Pam Pearson, who was the general manager at KTLA, called me up. And she said, we need an HR director. And I'm like, I don't know. East Coast to West Coast, really? And Jim had had a heart attack. He was the Jim Fix skinny guy who had a high cholesterol from genetic. And he got that under control. And I just didn't think that it was a good idea for him, his health, to move to LA. But when I came home and told him Pam Pearson called and have a job in LA for an HR director, he went, yes, yes, yes. And so we began our journey in LA in 1997. Jim went to work at first at an independent station in the newsroom, and the newsroom started to get more sensationalized, and they wanted to do more hard copy, more entertainment, flashy news, and that was not Jim's beat. So my news director at KTLA said, I said, Jim's going to start looking for a job outside of this wacky newsroom. And he said, well, I want to hire him. I said, Jeff, I can't hire my husband. He said, well, let me just do some research. So they called corporate HR, and as long as Jim wasn't offered a contract, he was a freelancer, he could work there. So he and I worked together from about 2000 till when we retired in 2014. And the station that Jim worked at, this is a little snippet of unuseful information, but it's sort of fun. The anchor that Jim worked with at the station that he left is now Jeff Bezos' girlfriend.
Oh, wow.
And so he knew her, and it just was so funny for me to see her. And she's a Latina, and to see her in the arms of the richest man in the world. But Jim and I had a great time at KTLA. We loved LA. We had a little bungalow in Studio City, which was less than 10 miles from the city. We thought our whole life was going to be in LA and that we would retire there. And as time marched on and time got to be, we started just thinking about LA in general terms. The taxes are high, everything is just expensive, and it's just not a good place for old folks to retire when you get on a fixed income. So I was born and raised in Denver. Jim was born and raised in Denver. Well, Jim was born in Southern California, but he was raised in Denver. And we decided we'd come home. So in 2011, we bought a townhouse here in Denver, which we could not afford now. We sold our house in LA and moved into a one-bedroom furnished apartment for 4 years.
Wow.
I thought there could be a homicide or a suicide or a homicide-suicide living in 700 square feet in an apartment. But it worked out great. We had so much more time to take bike rides and hike. And so we ended our career. Jim was 10 years older than I was, and he said, I am never going to be the guy that sits home while my wife goes to work. So I'm going to work till 70, and can we agree that you'll work till 60 and we'll retire? Well, I got to work a year longer, 61. We moved to Denver. And, it was hard because my job in California for the last about 8 years was really, I got promoted several times after I took the initial job. I ended up being the regional HR director for 13 television stations, which included all the union negotiations, all of the grievances, arbitrations. I had a very good staff that did what I like to do, hiring. We did, a lot of benefits, and I sat around the big table with the big guys, and so my job really was crazy during the last 5 years. I traveled all the time. And so, coming to a complete stop after being like that was an eye-opening experience. But one of the things that I did that I think was one of my favorite accomplishments when I worked at KTLA was shortly after Donald Trump had started Your Hired show, and we had an opening for a weather anchor, a traffic anchor, which rides in the copter, and all over LA. And I wrote up a little treatment about hiring this person and and we did it during sweeps, You're Hired, and instead of You're Fired. And we had a casting call, and we had all these people and then we narrowed it down. There were 3 judges. I was one of the judges, but it was a huge revenue maker. HR sometimes is, we spend money, we cost money, it's benefits, it's this, it's that. And so, if you're in HR and you're looking for an opportunity, try to find an opportunity where you could have an impact on revenue. By the way, the young woman that we hired still works there.
Wow.
And she now always sits on the anchor desk. She does all the pre-Oscar shows. Her name is Jessica Holmes, Holmes, and she was in LA. She had gone there after college. She was a Disney musketeer or something in Disney World.
Wow.
She had come to LA to try to get some acting jobs and some hosting jobs. Her car was packed, and if she hadn't gotten chosen for this, she was driving back home to Florida. So she was saved at the last minute by KTLA. So yeah, I've had a great life. When I got to Denver, Jim and I had a beautiful home that was already decorated with all of our own things. We collect Mexican folk art, and we have a lot, and it was all ready to move into. Can't really get the full measure, and I had to work as soon as Jim, got this illness, to find some place that would do an MRI on a pacemaker patient. There are 3 hospitals or were then: Andy Anderson, John Hopkins, and UCLA. It took me 2.5 months to get an appointment for Jim at UCLA to have an MRI. And the MRI showed that he had a giant mass. It was inoperable. And but at least we knew, there was all kinds of questions. Did he have epilepsy? Did he have this? Did he have that? And so
a virus from another country, yeah. How was his state of mind? I said, they ask you about the virus from another country, or where you've been, and what kind of bugs you've been near. I know, I understand that it's very frustrating. How was his state of mind at that time?
Paul, he was, it was his emotional center. It was on the left side. Mm-hmm. 3 columns of numbers, and carrying a number over, he couldn't do those.
Yeah, the diminishment in the mind is so frustrating. It's such a feeling of helplessness when.
This was but yeah, he emotionally, that was sad for me because I couldn't reach him like I had always reached him. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a long 5 months until he died, and oh my God, I think I did a lot of really positive things for myself. First, when he first got sick, I got therapy, and I'm fortunate to have insurance that can pay, that would help pay for the therapy. I had to go twice a week. I had such pain in my gut. And so the therapist was all about self-care. And I had to go with a list every time I went in about what I was doing for myself. I had the best posse. I have great girlfriends, and my sister, niece, and daughter were like everything to me. And so, my therapist really talked to me a lot about not having really any regrets in my marriage and not having any regrets about Jim's treatment, and that those things would really help to carry me through. And they did, but it's just the loss of companionship, the daily getting up. Jim was a big breakfast eater, and I was a short order cook. You tell me what you want. You want green chili, you want eggs, you want pancakes, you want waffles, you want an omelet, and that was kind of the way we started our day. And after he died, honest to God, for 3 months, until I broke my tibia and ankle 3 months after he died and had to have surgery, I couldn't even barely get out of the bedroom. It was, if I couldn't even make a cup of coffee at first. But, I have just continued to Jim, he used to say I was the strongest person he knew, and I wanted to be that person. I really wanted to be that person, and I've tried. And my poor little dad, 88 now, his wife died 4 years ago. He lives 3 miles from me. So we spend a lot of time. He cries a lot. I don't cry all the time. He does. But yeah, so I have a great support system. I had a great marriage. I had so much fun in living in Denver, DC, LA, now finally back home. And yeah, I've had a tremendous life. And in the last 2 years, I've really tried to get out of my bubble. And I am now the president of a nonprofit organization called Women in Film and Media Colorado. We're a chapter of a national organization, and we provide a lot of learning opportunities by having professionals in to do seminars. We have an industry fair every year. We have several contests where we give scholarships. We have screenwriting contests where we'll award a table read afterwards. Wow. We're going to do a big drone 3-parter about how do you become a drone operator. That's a hot skill right now. How do you get licensed? How much is equipment? So we've done a lot on this in this organization, and it was a lifesaver. At first, I could barely function at the board meetings. I knew what I needed to do, but I was just so frozen. And I used to sit around the big table and for the first 2 years, I just, I think I was in a fog. Were you in a fog, Paul?
As you're talking, I'm going through and I'm remembering thinking to myself, who am I now? Who am I? First I was, Paul, Rita's husband, and then I was Paul, Rita has cancer. Then I was Paul, my wife is in hospice care, my wife's dying. And then all of a sudden, my wife is gone. And who am I? They talk about reinventing yourself, and you literally have got to get yourself together. You have to pick up the pieces, and you have to move forward, or you will go backward, and I mean backward. And so, yeah, I was in a fog. Barbara, I was so lost and so confused, and on top of that, I was angry. And so for me, it was really a difficult transition, and I was really like a ship without a rudder because I didn't know where I was going, And so, yeah, what you're saying rings so true to me. When someone, when you lose a spouse, and especially if you had a good marriage and been married a long time. How long were you married?
We were together 37 years.
Wow.
Married 34.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's a really tough loss for a person, you know, and there's really
I can't date. You can, Paul. You've gotten through that. And I just, God, that makes me sick.
Yeah, you know, it's so funny how men and women have different, I don't know, constraints or I don't know if the word is just abilities, but you know, men seem to find this emptiness and this loneliness, and they go out and they start dating. And I you know, I have it in my book. I have a section where it's called "Is There Life After Death?" And I had a friend whose husband died, and she never went on another date in 20 years. Not a thing. You know, and I have another friend, and her husband died, and 3 months later, she was married to the man that she was married to when I met her. And you know, so it's like there's really no wrong answers.
Different strokes from different folks.
Yes, you know, we all handle pain and grief and loss so differently, and that's, you know, that's just really one of the spices of life, I guess.
I really would like somebody to take me to dinner and take me to a movie after COVID's done, but I'd like a companion. I'd like somebody to cook for.
Absolutely.
I love to cook. And so, you know, it just is it's a healing. And Jim, I don't know about you, Paul, Jim took care of all the paperwork. I'm ashamed to admit it. He fired me from the job years earlier because I entered a deposit 2 or 3 times. And he fired me from the job, and he was very organized, and I was lost. That paperwork and getting hospital bills after they died. Ugh!
I remember she paid all the bills. I gave her the check. You know, my check was deposited in the bank, and she paid all the bills. So, you know, I had a checking account, but I wasn't, you know, I didn't know how to balance a checkbook, and I didn't know anything about any of the household bills, and you know. I also have a chapter in my book, a section called "I've Learned That Most Men Are Asses." And I looked at myself from a different perspective, and I saw that, my gosh, I never really did much helping around the house. And, you know, I did a lot of the traditional male roles, and I took advantage of that. And it was really an eye-opener to realize, oh my gosh, she has to cook dinner every night. You know, I cooked a couple of nights a week, but, you know, here I was now doing all the laundry, cooking all the clothes. I looked on my desk in my office, and there was a stack of papers that I hadn't gotten to, junk mail and, you know, some bills, and I was just so out of it that, man, it was baptism by fire for me, you know, because it was a completely new perspective and a new life altogether.
Ugh. I wouldn't want to do it over, would you, Paul?
I just hope and pray that it doesn't, I mean, life is fickle, and we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And so I've kind of come to a point, Barbara, now in my life where I just really want to enjoy it as much as I can. I want to laugh.
Yeah, me too. And
Yes.
my sister said to me the other day, she said, do you think you'll ever date again? And I said, I don't know, Jane. It has to be organic.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be me going on a dating site and looking at pictures and making a decision that way. It has to be organic. And she said, what wouldn't you want in a guy? And you know what I said? And you'd say this too, Paul, a nurse. I don't want somebody that's sick. It's too, not that if I was with somebody and they got sick, that's part of the bargain, but I couldn't take that on again.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, no. Well, I mean, you know, I would do whatever I had to do. You know, I mean, as I was going through my journey, I found all kinds of people in different situations who had spouses who were terminally ill. And I would say that probably at least 50% or more of them, whether male or female, walked away from the marriage. And I couldn't conceive of that in my, you know, for myself. I couldn't, under any circumstances. And I've learned a lot about myself. One, I've learned that I know that I stood up to the task. I was there. I never walked away. I never left. And I know that if it happens again, I'm sure I'll do the same thing, you know. But oh my gosh, I don't want to do it again, you know.
No, you never know how strong you are until being strong is your only choice. That's what happens when you're taking care of a terminally ill spouse.
You know, one of the things that or what?
Child.
Or a child.
Anybody.
Anybody.
Yeah. Oh my God. Can you imagine a child?
No. we were watching.
And you know something else? It took me 2.5 years to sleep in to get in the bed in our bedroom.
Oh.
I had to 2.5 years. I slept on the couch.
Wow.
I just could not get in that bed. The shrink would say, "Are you in the bed?" No. How about sleeping diagonally so you fill up the whole? No.
Yeah.
How about? Yeah. No.
Oh my gosh, I remember going to bed.
Go out, be on the bed.
Yeah. I remember laying in the bed and just reaching my arm over, and of course there was an empty bed. Well, she hadn't slept in the bed for a year and a half, because she'd been in a hospice bed, but even still, I reached over and instinctively looked for her, and it was so mind-boggling that this is reality. I mean, I literally would pinch myself and say, "Is this real? Did this really happen?" And yet here I was, and starting from scratch. I'm completely now I'm Paul Lane starting over.
Yeah, right.
And it's good to be able to chuckle about it now, but oh my gosh, it was no laughing matter. And did you go to grief support after his passing?
Paul, I did not, because I had my one-on-one therapist, and that was really grief therapy. Mm-hmm. And so, because I'm a spoiled girl, I went one-on-one. And honest to God, my sister used to make fun of me when I come home, because I would get my therapist to cry every week. She would start crying. When I'd start to cry, she'd start to cry. Mm. And for some reason, it felt very, like she felt my pain.
Empathetic.
So I did not do grief therapy per se. I did therapy. I still go once a quarter to therapy.
Good for you.
To just check in. And I've never been a therapy girl. I've never gone to therapy, but I knew I had to this time.
They say, I believe it's 12% of people go through support after the loss of a loved one, and I got to tell you, I went to grievance support groups for probably 3 months after she passed, and it was pretty helpful for me. I think it was more hearing the voices of other people going through the same kind of loss. But nobody's loss is your loss, and so nobody can say, "I know how you feel," which is one of the worst things I heard people say when she was ill, or there was so many things that they would
that
say.
is one of the biggest one. I know how you feel.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I think you do. What I say to people that are in the same situation now, when I'm talking to them, I'm so sorry that you're suffering.
Yes.
That's the right thing.
I lost a sister-in-law. I lost a sister-in-law a few months ago to pancreatic cancer, and I called up my brother-in-law, and we cried together here a few weeks ago, and I told him, "Hey, listen, my phone's going to be on. I usually shut it off at night, but I'm going to leave it on." And I was so blessed when my phone rang at 10:45 on Wednesday night, and it was my brother-in-law, and he just said, "Hey, I called to test you," and it's like, if you are that person that someone's calling, don't let them down. They need you. They really need you, and you are the rock that they're hanging on to in a fast-moving stream. And so, having someone to reach out to, for me, it was my friend Lindsay Heyer and my brother Terry. But I didn't have a big support group of people that I could call on, and people I felt comfortable pouring my heart out to. And it's hard to cry it's hard for a man to cry in front of someone else, And so there was a lot that was held in that was not able to be expressed, and for me. But the grievance counseling did help me, to a degree. It finally got to a point where I had a counselor, and I called her up and I told her what my problem was, and she goes, "I can't help you with this. This is over my head," And so I left the group, and
that's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's really crazy. Reinventing yourself is such a, I don't know. I think there could be a book written on it, because there's so much involved in. Not only are you now paying all the bills and doing the laundry, but now you're in sole support of your mental stability and your emotional security, and so it's really difficult. Folks, if you're just joining us, you're watching the Weekend Boost on KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive, and I am Paul Lane. We're talking to Barbara Nash Lopez. Oh, Barbara Lopez Nash?
Yes, Barbara Lopez. It doesn't matter what her.
But
In there.
Barbara's a dear friend of mine. We have in common that we both lost a spouse to a grade 4 brain tumor called a glioblastoma, and we're just talking about the loss of that, and the starting point and where what you do after this situation happens to you. And this is I'm just so thankful that we're talking about this. It's very therapeutic for me too.
And Paul, you wrote a great book about this subject.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Can you just tell me a little bit more about where you are? You published it a second time, right?
Yes, I actually retitled it. It was originally called Through a Caretaker's Eyes, and
yes.
It didn't have the impact that I was hoping that it would, and it didn't have a subtitle. And after so many years, I thought about it, and honestly, I wanted to rewrite I wanted to do some changes in it, but time did not allow, and so I changed the name of the book to The Caregiver's Handbook, A Self-Help Love Story. And honestly, what happened was I went through and I read the book again, and I saw that, the things that I thought about taking out are really pertinent to this story, but more importantly, death brings out the best and the worst in us all. And I won't lie to you, the death of my wife's illness and death brought out the worst in me. I mean it. I saw my worst side, and I grew a lot, but I saw my best side too, Barbara. I saw that, my niece used to tell me I was like one of those clowns that you punch and it bounces right back up. You punch it again and it bounces right back up. Because I had so many trials. I mean, it was 3 days before Christmas, and they came up to us and said, the insurance is not going to cover your wife's health. Stay here at the hospice center, and you got to take her home. I said, wait a minute, you got 9 nurses taking care of her every 24 hours, and you're going to send me home alone? I'm not capable. I'm not qualified. I can't do this. And you know what? They sent me home, Barbara. They sent her home. And for 6 weeks, I kept her. And you know what? I did it. I managed it. I'm way beyond what I thought was my most extreme capability. I went beyond it, and you know what? When the insurance kicked back in after the first of the year, I took her back to the hospice center, and I would say she probably gained 5 to 7 pounds. Her face at home. Her face was so badly broken out. I don't know because of the medication or what, but she had really bad breakouts in her face. Her face was clear when I took her back. Her state of mind was a completely different and a higher level, and I did it. I didn't want to, but I did it, and so it did.
And that was a gift, Paul, because, it was a gift.
Absolutely. I'm sure that you go back through and remember times when Jim was in some, some difficult times, and he needed you, and you were there, and you guided him back, and, because my wife's, hers was the left side of her brain too. And so that does, it affects a lot of our reasoning. It affects a lot of our decision-making skills, and so it's really a hard place to lose your person, if that makes sense. I'm sure you can relate to that.
Yes, definitely, because they're not there fully for you.
No.
They're there in the body, but they're not. And to not be able to talk about what's going on and them understand, and it's just it's a daily process of taking care of someone that's dying.
Absolutely. And
Daily process.
It seems like you're on a treadmill that's just never going to end. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, when is this going to end? Is this, did I went through so much soul searching. Am I being punished? Is she being punished? And in the end, it really came down to, this is life. This is really what life is.
Yeah, Jim he and I always promised each other that he was going to live to 100 and I was going to live to 90. And then we thought that I'd be young enough to drive, and we'd be driving up to Big Sur, and we'd just go over the edge, and the kids would all think it's an accident, and we'd be together. That was our plan. That's not what.
Oh my gosh, you put a lump in my throat. Yeah, it's so funny because, Dee and I were talking this week about how good life is, and, if we die, it would be, when we die, it would be so beautiful to, like in the movie The Notebook, how they just laid down and the couple just died together,
Yeah.
Boy,
it's just, You know, I'm just so, and you have to just find meaning. At first, didn't you just feel like the only thing that I could see was my own pain?
Yes.
And you know, gradually you start to take pleasure again in your grandchildren and going places and doing things with people. But it's still hard for me sometimes to make myself do certain things, you know, that are without Jim.
Yes.
You know, he was my editor. Whenever I had to do big presentations, and now that I have my little consulting business, he was my editor.
Wow.
And was our family editor, and there's so many little things. But I talk to him every day, and you know, you reach the point where you're so glad and happy and grateful for what you had, instead of what you're not going to have any more of.
Yes,
You
I
know,
agree
or
so
you
much.
start to dream of what was to be. I don't do that so much anymore. Dream of what was to be. I take gratitude in what was.
You know, I'm so glad you mentioned gratitude, Barbara, because if it wasn't for gratitude, I don't know how I would have gotten through all of the down that I'd gone through. You know, because it's so easy to focus on what's happening and how bad it is and how dire the situation is and how depressed it is, how depressed you are, and all of a sudden you step back and you go, oh my gosh, you know, I got 10 fingers, man. I can still see. You know, one of the hardest things for me was to admit and to realize that only one body went into the ground. Because I walked around for 6 months telling people I would be dead in 6 months. You know, I really did. And I didn't have any reason to live. I didn't want to live. I was just, at the end, I didn't want to live. And I remember a friend coming to me and she said, you know, you're writing your book. What chapter are you on? And I told her what chapter I was on. She goes, so was that the end of the book? I said, no, I'm going to write a couple more chapters. She goes, well, why are you writing the end of your life? Don't you know that this is a chapter? You got to turn the page, pal. And it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah. I mean, there's certain things that people say to you that just really reach you. I remember a friend of mine, her husband was the general manager of the television station that I served supported in San Diego, and her husband died of pancreatic cancer. And I was with them through, this is before we left LA, you know, making sure that all the HR things were up to speed and things were, you know, nailed down as he was dying. And after he died, it was before Jim died, before my mom died, and she said something to me that just really stuck in my mind. She said, what death is of somebody that you love it's your heart. And when they first die, it just breaks open and is bleeding. And then you start to form scabs, and the bleeding stops, and it's just seeping, and then it might stop it altogether for a while, but then something in your heart starts bleeding again. The scab breaks open, and there you are again, having to build another scab. And I think that that rang with me. You know, you get to the point where I'm pretty well healed. You're never going to be healed. That scab's going to break open again and again. And so you just have to do it with the best that you can. And I just, you know, go forward, arms back, shoulders back, head high, and just, right, Paul?
That's right.
Right, Paul?
That's right. You know, I that's what you're saying rings so true to my ears too, because I have found that I'm a crybaby. I am such an emotional man now, and I can cry with empathy, seeing someone else's pain now, and I was always pretty empathetic, but to me now it's more like I have a friend, Alan Rail, and Alan's one of my Facebook friends and a childhood friend, and he has 9 family members who now have the COVID virus. And I saw it this morning, and I just cried in my heart. You know, I bowed my head and I said a prayer for the Rail family. And you know, he has a sister who's been on an intubator on oxygen for more than a week now, and I feel like I am so much more of an empath than I ever was before, and it's changed me inside and out. and I mean for the better.
You know what? I describe myself as an empath now. And I didn't before. You know, I was more Judge Judy at work, had to decide which was, take emotion out of it. Now I am totally an empath. And I look for any opportunity I can to do something for somebody else. Because in reality, I'm doing it for myself.
Yep.
So, I look for that junky car behind me at Sonic, can I buy them lunch? I just try to find some things that'll, help somebody else because we're helping ourselves all.
I agree. They talk about altruism, and I mean, there's always some part of altruism that is, and I don't want to call it self-serving, but self-fulfilling. When I am able to reach out and to touch somebody, or if I see somebody that's hurting and I am able to go out and comfort them, and it is the most fulfilling thing, and what life really, I believe, is about.
Mm-hmm.
I love the saying, none of us is going to get out of here alive, and while we're here, let's do some meaningful things with this life we have. We said we were going to talk about politics, but in a couple of weeks we have a big election coming up, and we're at a turning point right now, and we're at a point right now where America it's going to have some reckoning, and there's going to be people in America that are going to have reckoning, no matter what side of this election you're on. And I just hope and pray that I come down on the positive side of it, and I really want to be as positive for change as I can.
Well, everything needs healing. Our earth needs healing. Our bodies and lungs need healing from COVID. I just think everything needs healing. And and you and I are still in the healing process. So, the world needing healing on top of us needing healing, on top of us trying to take care of our family. It's a difficult time.
Yes.
And I feel so bad for anybody that has lost somebody to this disease. My cousin's husband died of it. It is just, and who knows, it's just to be the fifth in the world's population and have 20% of the cases is just heartbreaking in our rich country.
It's brutal. It's just inexcusable. It really is. I was thinking about something when you were talking. I know what I want to tell you about healing. When we met, you gave me a gift. It was the Palo Santo sticks, and I have got to tell you, I still have a few pieces left, but I've splintered them out in little sticks, and I've blessed people with those. So your blessing to me has been a blessing to a bunch of other people, and I'm so thankful because, man, that's such a wonderful.
And you need to go to Natural Grocers; they have them.
Oh, I will. I'm almost out, so I will go get some.
I mean, it is healing.
Yes.
Thank you for mentioning that, Paul.
Yes, I got to tell you, whenever I get a little stick out, I think of you, Barbara, and I think of our friendship.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I mean, I remember when we first met and we were talking, and you said my husband died of a brain tumor, and I was like, oh my gosh, no, glioblastoma, yeah. And it was like we have a forever bond.
It was like, oh my God. I want this guy. He knows, he understands, he's been there,
Yes. And
we were in Butte with another friend. Oh, and that's another thing, Paul, that we should mention is healing through nature.
Oh my gosh.
Healing through nature.
Yes.
There's something about knowing that a root is way down in the earth and been there for 100 years, and that we breathe our air and look at our beautiful water and take joy in the sunsets and then in flowers and soon the snow. I don't know about that. But joy in nature and healing in nature.
Yes, I agree. And there's so much out there that we can draw upon and to heal and to recover from loss and pain and grief and conflict, and nature really is the best. I think it's the best outlet and the best place to find yourself healing. One of the things that I've done in the last year is I grew sage last year in my garden, and this year it's just thriving. And so I'm tying bundles, and I'm getting bundles all to my friends and family, and and blessing families and friends' homes.
I'll be one of those people, okay?
Hey, I got one for you. I have a bundle for you.
What was that bird that you were looking for when we were up there?
OSHA. And I still
How do you?
OSHA, just like the safety organization. And actually, my brother sent me some pictures of it, and so we've gone hunting for it in the mountains. I have yet to find some. There's a yarrow. If you've ever seen yarrow looks much like OSHA, except the leaf of the OSHA is more fern-like, and the yarrow looks like a short fern, but it's not. Similar flower, everything, but it's not the same plant.
And you tell me your mom, you had it on your chest for colds, or what did you tell me that was your?
What my mom did was she would stick one in my shirt pocket, or I would carry one in my pants pocket, or she would put it in a little plastic bag and safety pin it inside my shirt, and it would stop fight infection, and it would give you. I believe it would strengthen your immune system. I guess that's how my mom viewed it. And so OSHA is something that's very, very common in the Hispanic Latino culture, especially in Colorado that I know of. And my brother lives up in Craig. I had a couple brothers in Craig, and they go up and collect it pretty regularly. And so I definitely want to get some root. But I ended up, when we were in Crested Butte, I got some tincture of it, and I'm about out of it now. So thank you for reminding me.
This has been fun, Paul.
So where do you go from here? Where are you going now, Barbara? What's your next adventure in life?
Well, this summer I tried to do more physical activity because being depressed for me is sitting on the couch, and I don't want to sit on the couch. So I tried to do a lot of physical activity, and I'm going to try to do that now going forward, adding that more into my life. I have a bike, and I plan to take a lot of fall rides on my bike. Professionally, Paul, I always have a half a dozen or so clients that I'm helping with job readiness skills or trying to land a job. And then I come off the board in April of Colorado Women in Film and Media, and I'll probably, be on a subcommittee and do some work there. And I really, after COVID, I really want to do some sort of volunteer work that's meaningful, like meaning that I go every week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I'm thinking, one of the things that I'm thinking about now that I'm in my late 60s is Meals on Wheels.
Oh, wow.
Feeding people that are hungry, and I like to drive and visit with people, and I think that if I could go in and provide a meal to somebody and give them some comfort. And I love children too. I think there's nothing in our children today not being able to go to school, not being in their mothers that are so pressed with taking care of all the household duties, and then teaching her, and that would have been a disaster if I was trying to teach a high school. You mean 2 + 2 isn't the kind of math you do? I would be sunk.
Oh man. I'm trying.
So I don't know if I.
No, go ahead, please.
Something to help, but yeah, I look for more volunteer work.
Yes, Barbara, the world needs people like you. I mean, just the time I've known you, I just know that you are a change agent. You're a person who just has a grasp on reality and a great perspective on life, and I mean it. I'm just so glad that I got to become your friend, and I'm so glad that we got to share stories and cry together and really just appreciate.
We have more stories and more trying to do together too, Paul.
That's right.
And I'm so happy for you that you have a new partner that is so meaningful and makes you happy and smile, and that you have plans together and a future together. So good for you.
You have got to come meet Dee. You got to come meet her. I mean,
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, I've told her about you, and she says, "Yeah, well, maybe we can meet sometime." So, it's just
COVID.
One of the things that I love about this position is that I get to meet people like, well, I've known you before this, but just getting to really get to see this side of you, because I mean, I'm sure this is not a side that you really talk about all the time. And I know the grief that I felt, and I'm sure that you felt something very similar to the grief I felt. And you're here, you're still here, and you're still fighting, and you're still making a difference, and you're still touching people's lives, and that's your purpose. I think that you're just you're that change agent that people
That
need.
is my purpose. And Jim wanted me, I know Jim would want me to be happy.
Yes.
And I know that because he always wanted me to be happy. So he wants me to be happy, and I'm working my darndest, and I am pretty happy. I am pretty happy. I'm still sad, but I'm happy.
Right on. Right on. Folks, you've been watching the Weekend Boost on KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive. I'm Paul Lane. We've been talking to Barbara Nash Lopez, consultant, network executive, a wife of Jim Nash, White House correspondent, and my friend. And Barbara, I'm just so thankful that I know you, and so thankful that you've been a part of my life, and that you've come onto the show, and I'm so glad I finally tied you down and got you on here.
Yeah, thank you. Namaste.
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 Yes. So Barbara, I'm going to keep you on the air after we sign off here, so we can just chat for a minute. But this has just been a really great hour, and I'm so thankful, and I'm hoping for the best in the next months to come. And Dee and me are looking at moving down to Pueblo, Colorado here pretty quick, and so we're happy and sad about it. But it's new things on the horizon, and if you're someone who has lost a spouse and you're lost and you're hurting and you're lonely, don't stay home and don't sit in front of that TV and mourn. Get up and walk out and look at the sunshine. That sunset is beautiful, especially with these fires right now. Go out and appreciate it. Every day is a gift. That's why they call it the present. Take advantage of it. Live this life. Live and love and smile and be happy. And cry. Yeah, it's all right to cry. But smile and love. I'm Paul Lane. This is the Weekend Boost. Have a great day. Thank you.